Assalamualaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
Walaikum assalam.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Walaikum salam, Sister Leila. How are you?
Alhamdulillah. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Unmute, Leila.
Okay, right. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Salatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Welcome, everyone, to a Saturday morning or afternoon workshop. My name is Leila Shatara. I'm the president of CISNA. And today we have our executive director, Sufia Azmat, and two of our board members, Sister Azra and Brother Ibrahim. Today's topic is differentiated instruction, and we will begin shortly, inshallah. I want to thank those of you who joined us as new members. Welcome aboard. We need your support again, and I try to remind everyone that we're able to bring you these types of workshops and webinars throughout the year, but we need your support. Please join CISNA. Become members. It's a nominal fee, but you get a great deal of support from a national organization, networking abilities through our WhatsApp groups, advocacy at the federal and state level, and of course, these workshops that we've been able to provide regularly since the pandemic began. Again, thank you for joining us on this Saturday. Our presenter today is Brother Ibrahim. He is one of our CISNA board members. Brother Ibrahim Yusuf is the principal of Nashville International Academy. He entered the field of education 12 years ago as a volunteer. He came into the education from different fields. At the time, he had been involved in flipping and renovating homes, starting up a small restaurant, and managing a family business. But after witnessing the role that schools could play in shaping the future of communities, he decided to switch careers and became a teacher. Since then, he has worked with Islamic schools in St. Croix, Houston, Pittsburgh, and Nashville. Brother Ibrahim earned a master's degree in educational leadership with the aim of exacting change on an organizational level. He's taught for 7 years and has been a school principal for 5 years. He believes the work of schools is rooted in creativity, compassion, communication, and the strong will to get things done. He has served on accreditation teams for the review of several schools in the US and abroad. He loves teaching, but also loves writing, architectural design, and cooking. His dream is to help improve Islamic education on a global level, especially in remote corners of the Muslim world. Thank you, Brother Ibrahim, for taking this on, and he's already making change on a national level for us. Jazakallah khair for joining, and Brother Ibrahim.
All right, thank you so much, Sister Leila. Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and thank you very much for stopping by today. I am Ibrahim Yusuf. My name is Ibrahim Yusuf, and I will be your presenter for today. I also would like to welcome all our CISNA board members, and thank you very much for organizing these workshops. I've noticed some familiar names as well, and thank you for coming. Welcome. And of course, a special welcome to the people of Georgia, and Pennsylvania, and Michigan, and Wisconsin, and maybe Nevada. I'm kidding, of course. Welcome to everyone. Alhamdulillah, it's good to have you all here. I actually would like to send a shout out to the teachers of Medina Academy from Washington. I heard that we had a lot of teachers sign up for this workshop. About 14 teachers signed up from Medina Academy. So I'd like to send a shout out to them.
We lost you, brother.
Amir, brother.
I'm sorry.
That's okay, you're back.
Okay. So today's topic, let me go ahead and share my screen. And we'll get right to it. All right, Bismillah. So today's topic for the day is differentiated instructions, but more specifically, the differentiated classroom. And we'll talk about why a classroom is you're differentiating the entire classroom, and it's not just the instructions. But to begin, I wanted to go ahead and start off with a pop quiz right off the bat to see what you guys already know about differentiated instructions, okay? So I'm going to reveal certain statements to you, and you have to state whether the statements are true or false. You can please use the chat box to share your answers, okay? So here we go. Number one. Differences in students is a problem. True or false? All right. Alhamdulillah, that's great. Yes, I see a lot of you answered false. That is correct. Differences are not problematic. Actually, believing that it's a problem is problematic, but differences are not. Okay, let me see the second statement. Trying to do my cursor here. Okay, here we go. Students have a very fixed learning style. True or false?
False.
False is correct. I see where we're using the chat box to answer these questions. Thank you so much.
Bismillah.
All right. Yes, correct. Intelligence is very fluid. It's not static and fixed. You know, I like to watch videos to learn, but I also like to read, and I also doodle and draw random graphics as I listen to a lecture. So there's different ways of learning that I am comfortable with. All right, next statement. Differentiation is a strategy, not an entire approach to teaching. True or false? Okay, I see a lot of truths. So differentiation is more than a strategy. In fact, it can change the entire landscape of your classroom. And that's something we're going to learn about today. All right, next statement. Sure why, there we go. I cannot accommodate gifted students in a normal class. True or false? Yes, false is correct. Gifted and advanced students can be accommodated. We just have to design the right plan for them. You know, they're still kids and they still need guidance. And then finally, a differentiated classroom looks very different than a regular classroom. True or false? A differentiated classroom looks visibly different than a regular classroom. Yes, if you answer true, that is correct. When you walk into a classroom, you immediately notice it looks visibly and physically different than a regular classroom. Okay, moving on. The reason I did this pop quiz at the very outset of today's lesson is because I wanted to illustrate the very first lesson of the day, and that is the importance of assessments. The importance of assessments. You know how in business they talk about location, location, location? Well, in differentiated instructions, it's all about assessment, assessments, assessments, or more specifically, pre-assessments. And that basically involves you have to be able to gather information and evidence about your students' readiness and interests and learner profile, which we will explore today, but also their progress and their knowledge and their understanding of things. You have to constantly be gathering evidence about where they stand and use that evidence and information to plan instructions that are more responsive to their needs. Here, for example, let me use, to explain why, I would like to use this analogy, right? Why do we have to assess students? I'm going to use an analogy and rely on Walt Whitman to help us explain. Walt Whitman was a transcendental poet, and he wrote this long poem called Song of the Open Road. And here's an excerpt from it. He says, "Here I carry my old delicious burdens. I carry them, men and women. I carry them with me wherever I go. I swear it is impossible for me to get rid of them. I am filled with them. From all that has touched you, I believe you have imparted to yourselves, and now you impart the same secretly to me." So basically in this poem, he describes people and things that he encountered. And it's not just people, it's not just men and women. He talks about places and objects, and that all of these things imparted something of themselves to him. You know, that these things have passed on things to him. And it could be lessons, it could be, knowledge, but it could also be like traumatic experiences, right? It could be words of wisdom or abuse. It could be facts or misinformation, wisdom or ignorance. And he calls these things burdens, and that he carries them with him wherever he goes. He carries them in his heart, he carries them in his memory. And he says, I swear it's impossible to get rid of them. Similarly, I think every student enters your classroom with, for a lack of a better term, with some kind of baggage, right? They're not empty vessels for us to fill. No, they come carrying with them these old burdens, if you will, baggage, that as teachers, we have to sort of unpack, clean it up, and repack it. So much that when they leave our classroom, those burdens are no longer burdens, but they're blessings, right? That will serve them long after they leave our classroom. But in order to help them, right, we have to assess the baggage. We have to assess those burdens. We have to assess what they're carrying with them before we even start to teach them. And we really have the entire year to unpack and repack. And to do that, that means you have to assess the students. You have to assess what they know and what they're carrying in their little minds and their little hearts. And that's constantly happening. Okay, so let's start with an example. Let's say that you're an Islamic studies teacher and you have arrived at the chapter in your book about Al-Ansar wal-Muhajirin, right? This is what typically happens in a classroom. Most teachers, they take the book, right? And the books tell them exactly what needs to be taught. So we develop a plan around the knowledge and the key vocab words and the activities in the book, right? We might create a PowerPoint presentation with the information that's presented in this chapter, and we might find a video even that is in line with the chapter, and presents the information maybe in an animated way. And then when students show up to our class, we explain the objective for the day, we start our presentation, we let them watch a video, they complete an activity, and they even share some of their ideas and some of their work at the end of the class period. Now, imagine if you, sorry, I need to. Now, imagine if you did a pre-assessment, a pre-test. It could be a journal entry, it could be a mind map, something, to determine what the students know about Al-Ansar wal-Muhajirin. And after this pre-assessment, right, after you gather that information, you realize that, one, for some of your students, this information is entirely new. They don't even know what the word Muhajirin means. And you also notice that another group of students, right, they know a few things about the Muhajirin. They know why the Muhajirin left Mecca. They know why the Ansar were receiving them. And finally, you realize that two of your students have a very deep understanding, a more nuanced understanding of the story. And they're able to connect that to brotherhood and community and teamwork. And they just have a more complex understanding of the situation. So after this pre-assessment, I want you to ask yourself this: would you still teach that chapter to all your students? You know, using the chat box, would you guys still, if you did that kind of pre-assessment and you've discovered this wide spectrum, wide range of students' abilities and readiness, would you still teach it the same way you had planned to teach it? Yeah, well, most likely not. Most likely not, because, you know, you have to reach out effectively to the spectrum of students. And if you're not reaching out, you're not meeting the needs of all your students, right? Those students who know the story already and have a complex understanding of it, if you begin to teach them the chapter that's more introductory, right? The level of learning is very basic and foundational for them. They're going to check out, and you know it's going to be like a review for them. But if you've given them something more advanced, you know, an activity to complete that's more on their level, then they're more likely not to check out, and you would have met their needs as a result. So, you know, we're talking about, if you're just joining us, we're talking about the necessity of pre-assessments when it comes to differentiation. Yeah, we have to assess the students and constantly determine where they stand in relation to the knowledge that we want them to know. Right? Here's a few. I have sort of strategies embedded throughout the presentation that I wanted to share with you. So one strategy. Let me move my cursor here. Something called entry and exit tickets. I'm sure you guys have heard of these before. If you are in person this year, something you can use is these charts. The teacher would post a question in this chart, and students walk into the classroom, read the question, and use Post-it notes to answer the question, and then they go and they place their answer on their corresponding seat number, right? And the teacher gets to see what they know in relation to the knowledge that she wants them to know. And in this case, it's about, you know, details about the setting of a story. And then, of course, if you are online, you can actually use Google Classroom to create questions. So in your Google Classroom, instead of creating an assignment, you just create a question and you can tell students to answer that question. And those are both entry and exit tickets that you can use to assess students, okay? And there's many different ways. I'll share another quick one with you here. There's something called quick scans, right? Which you can also do online or in person. So for the sake of just the example, let's say that you are teaching a chapter on the history of the Middle East, okay? Using your annotation tool right now, using your annotation tool, if you could please use arrows to select which topic you know a lot about, and using your check marks, select the topics that you know nothing about. So using your arrows, click on the topics that you know enough information about. Are you guys able to annotate? Is everyone able to annotate?
Do you want to
Okay.
maybe perhaps explain, Brother Ibrahim, to some, if they go
Yeah.
up to the top of the screen?
So you would go to the top of your screen, and where it says annotate, you click on annotate, and it gives you options as to what to do. And you can either select, so an arrow, if you know a lot of things about it, click on it, and then a check mark if you don't know much about it.
So for those of you who maybe haven't used it before, do you see on the top of your screen a green box that says you're viewing Ibrahim Yusuf's screen, and next to it, it says View Options. And if you click on that, then it shows you a menu, and you go to Annotate, and you click on Annotate, and then that will show you that you can choose the check mark, an arrow, and so forth.
All right, perfect. So you see, so I'm quickly sort of scanning where the majority of my students, for example, need a lot of help on, what topics they need to learn more about. And I also know which topics they know a lot about, right? And you can do this online or in person. In person, you can use those little red dots and green dots, and you can have your topics posted in the classroom, for instance. So this is another just strategy. And I'll kind of, like I said, embed strategies as we go along. So if we can clear the annotations, clear the screen, that would be great. Let me see, Miss Azra, are you able to clear them? Okay, here we go. I got it. All right, perfect. Okay, thank you. Let's stop annotation and let's move forward. Okay, just clear again. Sorry, let me just, oh, here we go. Perfect. Stop. Okay, more on pre-assessment. Okay, make sure I have. Okay, so when it comes to unpacking their baggage, so to speak, what they bring to what they're bringing to your classroom, it's not just that you have to evaluate them and understand them for their academics or where they are academically. You also have to learn more about each student, right? On a personal level, their likes, their dislikes, what they're good at outside of school, what do they take pride in, what is important to them, what do they spend hours doing, what makes them come alive, right? You have to get to know them on a personal level so that, you're continuing to unpack, to continue the analogy, and understand and know them better, right? You have to know them well to teach them well. And that involves also knowing them on a personal level. If you will, I want you to remember this graphic, okay? This is a graphic for you to remember, okay? It's a progress meter. And if you could, at the beginning of every year, I want you to imagine this graphic hovering over each of your students' heads, okay? And, in August, they're all kind of, you don't know much about most of your students, right? You don't know a lot of things about them. And each of those meters or progress meters is on red, which is a dangerous place to be. And as the year progresses, your awareness of them and your knowledge about them must constantly be developing. It must constantly be moving towards the green, right? Where you know them more and you can be more responsive to them. So when it comes to knowing your students, I want you to remember this graphic, just that it's hovering above their heads, and you learn more about them every day, and sometimes it goes back and forth, but you constantly have to be developing your awareness of them. And to that end, you have to ask yourself, what is your school doing? Has your school created scheduled time for building relationships, right? Things like, morning meetings, SEL classes, study hall, advisory meetings, or anything else. If you do not have that built-in time to build relationships with your students, then you have to sort of make the time, okay? You have to make the time, and what that means is you have to use class time. Dedicate some class time to get to know your students. Yes, absolutely. Don't teach a lesson. Just talk to them. Talk to them so that you can better understand what's going on and continuing to learn more about them. We're spending so much time on pre-assessments and understanding students because this is at the heart of differentiation. knowing individual students, both academically, socially, emotionally, culturally, in every way, okay? If you want to dedicate some class time, there's two ideas here that I wanted to share with you. One is called pie charts, okay? So, you can ask your students at the beginning of the class period to draw a circle that takes up most of the page, or you can actually distribute the ready-made circles. Tell them the circle represents their interests. They are to turn the circle into a pie chart that represents the things they are most interested in. Each circle must include at least 5 sections. The dimension of each wedge should reflect the student's level of interest in that topic or hobby. Students should represent the dimension of each interest. So you can even embed academics and math skills in here. And at the very end, you can have students share their work and share what they're interested in, put them in groups, let them discuss some of their similarities, and that would contribute to that classroom community. Another idea is something called attendance questions. While you're, in the hallway, maybe you can post a question on the board so that when students come in, they respond to it either in their journals or on the board itself. I like this idea of greeting graffiti. I actually did this when I taught in Houston. I had a separate wall, an entire wall that was covered in black paper, and whenever students came in, they used chalk to respond to a prompt on the board, and they would respond to it and they would write their names underneath it, and that way I came in, and I looked at the questions, I looked at their answers, I'm sorry, and I learned more about the students, and it was a quick way to just assess, and because we didn't have the time for relationship building. So those are 2 ways. Let me move forward here. Okay, what kind of information do you get from pre-assessment? Okay, this is the last thing I will say about assessments. Reading levels, right? Star reading and AR levels, right? You can understand, that's one thing that's one type of information you can gather. You can also gather how much they know about the topic, how new they are to a concept in relation to classmates or in relation to what you want them to know, right? You can assess their readiness for complex and abstract ideas, right? Or their lack of understanding of more foundational ideas and skills. You can also assess their misconceptions about an event or a fact. All of these things you can gather about your students when you do pre-assessments, and then finally use this information to plan your lessons. If you have to spend a day on pre-assessments and formative assessment, that's totally fine. It will help you in the planning process and in creating experiences that's more responsive to your individual students, right? And at the end of the day, why do we do all this? It's because differentiation is hugely concerned with students' individual growth. It's not about the whole group. It's concerned with individual growth, with the individual students. All right. So that's it on pre-assessments. We spent about 20 minutes because it's that important. Let's move forward. Here's one definition of differentiated instructions. The National Professional Resource says that it's a comprehensive and flexible process that includes the planning, preparation, and delivery of instructions to address the diversity of students' learning needs within the classroom. Through differentiated instructions, teachers take into account who they teach, what they teach, where they teach, and how they teach. Another definition comes from Carol Ann Tomlinson's book. She says, at its most basic level, differentiating instruction means shaking up what goes on in the classroom so that students have multiple options for taking in information, making sense of ideas, and expressing what they learn. And then finally, I have a definition here also that it's about creating classroom environments, lesson plans, and learning experiences that match student needs and guarantees individual student growth. So those are the different definitions of differentiated instructions. Let's do another activity here real quick. Okay, so I'm going to reveal descriptive statements about students who need differentiated instructions. And as I reveal the statements, I'll reveal one statement at a time. Okay, I want you to think of your own students, right? I want you to think of your own students or students that you have known in the past that meet this criteria. Let me just make sure I have it. Okay, yes. All right, here goes. Bismillah. First statement. Students that require more time. Right. Think of your students this year or students that you have worked with in the past. Students that bring with them to the classroom great reservoirs of knowledge that other students do not bring. You always have that one student who knows so much about a topic, right? Students who need to move around more than others. Typically, we think of the student as a problem, an inconvenience. But as you know, he or she essentially needs just more differentiation. Students seem to have given up on school or themselves or adults and are angry or lethargic much of the time. So you guys are thinking of your own students, right? Students that you have known or worked with or currently work with. Have difficulty concentrating during whole class discussions. Yeah, we all know that one student as well. Are poor test takers but actually understand far more than they show. And finally, will not engage with learning if they fail to see the point of it. If there's no relevance, if there's no meaning, then they will not engage. Okay. And those are all different students who simply need differentiation. Okay, so I have two driving questions that will guide you throughout this workshop. Let's just clear the annotations. All right, here we go. Stop annotating. Okay, so these are the two driving questions that we are going to explore today, and that you as a teacher will constantly revisit throughout, when you're planning differentiated instructions, when you're making plans to meet the needs of all your students. First question is how to reach out to students who span a whole spectrum of personal interests, readiness, and learning profile. And then finally, what is it that I must do to differentiate the content, the process, and the products? These are the two things that we're going to focus on today, now. But by all means, I would encourage you to, to continue your learning and your understanding of differentiation. We're kind of scratching the surface of differentiation today. It's a good start, and it's a good way to get interested in it. And these two questions should constantly, the more you explore these two questions, the more you attempt to answer these two questions, the better you would become at differentiation. So, moving forward, the first thing we need to do is to learn these terms, right? This is another graphic that I want you guys to remember, right? This graphic is not, it's not hovering over their, students' heads. Imagine that it's somewhere maybe on their chest or their back, okay? This is what students bring with them, and what you have to adjust. You have to, adjust it. Sorry, you don't adjust it. You have to understand where they stand on this spectrum. Where is their readiness on this spectrum? Where is their interest? Where is their learning profile on a spectrum that spans really humanity? All kinds of people, right? All kinds of students. Let me share a quick definition of each one, and we'll delve into each one a little bit more. So readiness is a student's entry point relative to a particular knowledge, understanding, or skill. Interest refers to a person's affinity or curiosity or passion for a topic. Learning profile has to do with the way in which students learn. It may be shaped by intelligence, gender, or just learning style. As you guys know, some students need to discuss concepts with peers. Others prefer to work alone. Some students, they like the analytical tasks. Others prefer to see the big picture first. That's what learning profile is. So these are the quick definitions. Now, these are student factors, okay? So if you look at this table here, the items on the right, readiness, interest, and learner profile, are student characteristics. They come with the baggage. Students come carrying these things with them, and more, of course. But for our purposes, these are some of the things that we have to respond to. Right? Now, what do we do as teachers? We adjust the things on the left, in the left column: content, process, and product. So we're assessing and we're adjusting as we go along. We're adjusting these things, right? I know I have another graphic here for you to remember. Those are all memory aids. So this is a good graphic. This is the, the old radio equalizers, right? Teachers, they look at their students, they've assessed them, they've understood them, they did a pre-test. They got more information about their interests, they got more information about their learner profile, how they learn best, about their readiness in relation to a knowledge. And they come back and they fine-tune their instructions. They change content a little bit here, they change process a little bit there, the product, they change, and this is how they respond to what the students bring, right? Teachers adjust what they do in response to student readiness, interest, and learner profile. And if you do this successfully, you basically begin to meet individual student needs, right? I'm going to define these three things real quickly, and then we'll also explore them further. So content is basically teacher input, the standards, or chapter 7 in the textbook, or the math skills for the day, or World War II, or Shakespeare. That's content. Teacher input, what you want students to learn. The process is the activities that students engage in. Tasks, assignments, graphic organizers, writing, talking, presenting, journaling. Think of the word process, right? They're processing the information. How do you help them process the information? That's what you're fine-tuning. And then finally, product is something that students produce to demonstrate their understanding, that they get it. It could be a test, but it could also be a project or an essay or a 3D model. As long as it's tightly aligned with the learning segment, with what they've learned, as long as the product helps them demonstrate their understanding, then it's a product, right? And it's a little different than process, because process is usually a short activity for the day to help them process the information, whereas product can be more long-term. Okay, let's move on. So we understand the difference now. So let me go back real quick here. Make sure. So we understand the difference between what the teacher elements are, the curriculum elements, they're often called curricular elements, and what the student characteristics are. I'm going to move forward here and use and share an example with you, an actual lesson example. Let me just move a little forward. Okay, so let's talk about readiness. Okay, as we said, readiness is the entry point relevant to a particular knowledge understanding. Basically, what that means is, where do they stand relative to what you want them to know, right? Any topic that you talk about, any lesson that you teach, has certain levels of learning. For example, if you're teaching about the human cell, right, you can teach about the anatomy of a cell, all the different parts of the cell, but you can also teach about the chemistry and the relationships between the different organs and organelles and what happens on this, in the cell wall. And so anything you teach, there's a range of knowledge, different levels of learning that you can explore, that you can aim for. So what do you want your students to know? That's where you start. You have to start with the goals, the learning goals. What is it that you want students to know, and where do they stand relative to what you want them to know? You have to have that idea, right? Let's go back to the Muhajirin and Ansar lesson, okay? And I'm going to share something else here, if you just give me a chance. Bismillah. We are sharing, where is it? I have to find it. All right, here we go. So let's go back. Can you, no. Are you guys able to see my screen? Content,
Yes.
process, product.
Yes, we see it.
The penguins and the dolphins? Okay, perfect. Okay, so I'm going to use the pen here. I know it's a little messy, but how it goes.
Clean your room first. I'm listening to the meeting. Clean your room first, okay? Your
All right,
room.
so we have students in the house. Assalamu alaikum. Okay, so we talked about Al-Ansar al-Muhajirin. We're using that example, okay? And we understand that, let's say that the penguins, right? The penguins, they're the ones who have not heard anything about, about Ansar al-Muhajirin. So in the different levels of learning, they need foundational work. They need basic information, right? So the content that you develop, that you use to help those students, involves, the material, right? Maybe it's the textbook. Sorry about the handwriting, right? Maybe it's an actual mini lesson that you have to do with them, right? That's your content, right? The process, on the other hand, okay, they're not ready for analysis and research and, higher level thinking. So even the process is the activities that you give them would also be on their level, okay? Will also be on their level. Let me go back here to my presentation. Okay, so think of it this way. Okay, if students are advanced in readiness, right, you can skip the rote practice, right, or previously understood skills. You can skip that. They're on a different level of learning, right? You can assign them activities and tasks that are more open-ended, right, more abstract, more complex, all right? You can allow a pace of work that allows for deep thinking. On the other hand, if your students with less developed readiness, you need more opportunities for direct instructions or practice, right? Activities that are more structured and more concrete. There's fewer steps, require simpler reading comprehension, and there's a slower pace of learning. Okay? This is another graphic to remember. Okay. Typically, when it comes to what do you want them to learn, okay, the levels of learning, those with less developed readiness tend to benefit from the left side of this spectrum, right? The left side of this spectrum is more responsive to them, and those that are ready for higher levels of learning are more ready for the right side of this spectrum. And this means that you are, in fact, adjusting all of the teacher elements, content, process, and product in response to this. So the activities are simpler. The lesson is more structured. The lecture is slower paced, right? Whereas if they're advanced, you can give them a multifaceted project to work on. You can give them more it's more open-ended in the sense that research and essential questions that they have to answer. And this is how you weigh your readiness. When you're unpacking students, it's about first understanding where they stand in relation to what you want them to know, and adjusting and fine-tuning content, process, and product in response to that, okay? Here is a list of things to do. All right, so readiness, how do we respond? How do we adjust content, process, and product? Content, grade level reading, right? Maybe they're ready to read on their grade level. Maybe they're ready to read on a higher grade level. Don't let them, it's useless to let them read grade level readings if they're reading at a higher grade level, right? Mini lessons on a topic. For your Ansar and Muhajirin group that know nothing and this information is new to them, you're going to have to meet with them in smaller groups and talk to them about why, what is the story about? Who are the Ansar? Who are the Muhajirin? You're going to need a mini lesson for them. You can have magazines and articles on the topic, right? You can have, this is where, by the way, whenever we're talking about content, we're talking about resources, classroom resources, classroom sets, access to videos online, maybe subscription to like study.com. This is what you're talking about. Content is, resources, material in the classroom. Video recordings, small group instructions. We're going to talk about centers and stations later, inshallah. Process. How do you adjust your process? How do you fine-tune process in relation to readiness? Right. Again, your assignments that you give them can have various difficulties or a varying degree of difficulty. You can give higher order thinking tasks to some students, but if you think about Bloom's taxonomy, right? So other students still need to understand and apply, whereas others, they can create and evaluate. So that's how you differentiate process in terms of readiness. Agendas, we'll talk about agendas later. Model making, journals, think, pair, share. What are students ready to process? How are they ready to work out and make sense of the knowledge that you've given them? What are they ready for? You have to assess that, and you have to create opportunities and basically activities. Process is all about activities. It's all about active learning, students doing something. You fine-tune what students do after you've given them the knowledge and you've presented them with the content. And finally, product. These are, again, long-term, not a process where they have to process the information, but they're demonstrating their understanding. That's how process and product are different, right? So they're presenting maybe a news report. Maybe they're creating a photo essay. They're writing a letter. Imagine, for example, if you're doing the Ansar and Muhajirin lesson, and some of your students who really know a lot about it, they wrote a letter from a Muhajir to an Ansari or vice versa. That would be a fun activity to do. Design or build a structure, design a web page, create a short film. Again, the product is something they work on to demonstrate their understanding. Process is an activity that you develop, that you design for them to process and make sense of the knowledge you've given them. All right, moving on. So, like I said, we're going to talk about, I have strategies embedded throughout here. Let's talk about agendas, okay? So what is an agenda? I think agendas could be used in this environment for sure. While a lot of us are online, and many students at home are a little more advanced than others. So this strategy is a great way to meet the needs of students who are advanced. An agenda is basically a personalized list of tasks that a particular student must complete in a specified time, right? The teacher creates the agenda, right? That could last 1 week or even 2 weeks, right? Every time the student completes that agenda, the teacher develops a new one for them. And of course, they're not working entirely independently. There are times when they have to check in with the teacher to make sure that they're doing the right thing. Here is a sample agenda that I wanted to share with you. Okay. So think of this. You have on one column the teacher and student initials that at successful completion, both teacher and student initial it. And then in the middle, you have the task that the student must complete, right? And it basically describes activities, processes that students must complete, but you can also adjust content. You can tell them to read this magazine or read that article or look up this video or read that book. So you can adjust within this one strategy, you can adjust product, process, and content. Okay, so the task, practice adding fractions by completing the assignments on the board. So, you know, in advance, you have a corner in the classroom with some math, math problems that students, and that's part of what they have to do for the day. You have also in the corner, you have some iPads with a video editing app that they have to complete. You have articles ready for them to write a summary about. They have to choose an AR book. They have to, and this is just, you know, more elementary, I guess, but you can develop all kinds of activities and provide students with articles to differentiate content. And as long as they're completing the tasks and checking in with you, then that's very responsive to their needs. That's differentiated, and it's meaning, and it's their individual needs. And then you can also have special instructions for them, right? So that, you know, they can read and that would guide them further as they continue to complete their agenda. Okay, let's move forward. All right, so now that we have a general understanding, okay, about student characteristics, where they stand in relation to what you want them to know, and teacher factors that you adjust. Okay, well, I wanted to do a quick activity here. So we're going to do breakout rooms, and you have to create differentiated solutions for a lesson in teams. Okay, the task for each team is to modify basically content, process, and product, right? To come up with solutions for content, process, and product in response to a lesson. And I'll give you the lesson right now. Now, once you're in the breakout rooms, you're going to have to assign a spokesperson for the team. And then when we come back, each team will take 1 minute. Each spokesperson will take 1 minute to say and explain how did they modify those teacher elements, those curriculum elements in response to their findings, okay? So first, let me present to you the challenge, okay? So as a team, you have administered an assessment on ancient Rome, and the results point to a range of readiness levels, okay? Group A knows very little about ancient Rome. Group B referenced famous names and events, and Group C seems to be interested in government and architecture, okay? So I want you to take a moment to process this information, and we're gonna do breakout rooms. Breakout rooms, we have 65 participants, and automatically we are going to create 7 rooms, which puts us in about 9 to 10 people in each room. Let's do 8 rooms. That's 8 participants. Actually, you know what? For the sake of time, let's do 6 rooms, 10 to 11 participants. I'm going to create rooms. And then let me see, I have some of my CISNA board members that probably want to stay back. So actually, you know what, for the sake of time, you guys can head on back if you want to participate. All the Cisna board members, if you guys want to participate, you can stay in the breakout rooms. If not, you can always come back. Okay, so do we understand what we're doing in the breakout rooms? No. Okay, let me go back and explain. So you're getting into the rooms and you are designing a lesson. You're coming up with solutions for content, process, and product. Actually, you know what? Let me stop for a second and see if anybody has any questions. Let's do that before we move on. So do we have any questions about the information that has presented so far in terms of student readiness, and then the teacher elements or the curriculum elements that teachers have to modify? No questions? Okay, so this is what we're doing then. So I'm assuming that we all understand the differences between content, process, and product, and then readiness, interest, and learning profile. Okay, I know we're going to talk a little bit more about it, but this is just to see how you're doing so far and if you understand it.
Raheem,
yes.
Can I ask a quick question? So you've given us some topics. You want us to plan a lesson that's differentiated, that we could differentiate with content, process, and content based on the topic you gave us?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so again, the lesson is about ancient Rome. Some of your groups, you've done an assessment, you understand that some of your group of students don't understand much about ancient Rome, don't know anything about ancient Rome. Group B, they know a few things, they've referenced events and people. And group C seem to be interested in architecture and government. Okay. Once you get into your groups, talk about at least one item that you can modify. Okay, one item. So it can be your content, right? What information? How do you present the information? How do you differentiate the information? It could be your product, your process. I'm sorry, and the process is what kind of activities do you give students, or it could be your product. What can they work on to demonstrate an understanding? So this,
Brother Ibrahim,
yes.
Sorry, we have a request if we can see the last slide.
Yes,
before
of course.
we go on to the breakout rooms. Thank you.
This one?
I believe it's the one that shows all the three components with
Okay.
the information on it. That would be more helpful.
Of course.
Yes, this one.
There you go. Okay, so remember, the content, process, and product are the curricular elements that you as a teacher can control, right? That you as a teacher can modify and fine-tune. And you're fine-tuning this in response to what you know about your students individually and as a group. You're changing these around. In terms of content, right? How do you present that information? How do you give them access to the information? Where do they go to find that information? Are you giving them a lesson, a direct lecture? Is it a slideshow? Or they don't need that. They probably are ready for another level. They can probably read alone and find things alone, right? In terms of process, where do they stand in terms of their level of thinking about the topic, right? Can they do they still have to understand things and be presented with new information, or are they ready for higher order thinking? And then finally, product. So you can think about which of these elements as a teacher do you want to change, and what would you do? You can come up with one statement, honestly. Come up with one statement as a team. It doesn't have to be a full lesson plan. You can come up with one statement that describes your goal your goal as a team for fine-tuning these things, for adjusting these things in response to what you know about the students. Is that clear? Thumbs up if it's clear. Okay, this is an assessment too. If I don't see a lot of thumbs up, we can skip this activity.
So, Brother Ibrahim, I'm wondering if I may.
Yes, of course.
If we knew, like, okay, this is a social studies lesson, for example, and if we knew that the objective that we wanted students to know goal A, 1, 2, 3, that they know this about the history, this about the government, this about the people, kind of thing. If we knew the goals, then, for example, for content, we have 3 groups. Could we assign them each content about different, to meet the different goals and then present? And that way they, as far as content, we've differentiated content, but then when they present, they get exposure to all of it. Is that what we're looking at here? Or because, like, for group C, their interest in architecture, and I don't remember what the government.
Yes, yeah.
Could you give that group, some content that's completely different than group A that knows nothing?
Right, yeah, so you can provide them, for instance, with an activity on the architecture and government and how it reflects what's going on historically in that region at the time. But I think we can skip this activity. I didn't see a lot of thumbs up, so we can skip. We can move forward and come back to this, inshallah, later, maybe when we have a better understanding. We have about an hour left. Maybe we still need to just understand these different elements a little bit more. So let's skip this activity, inshallah, and we'll come back to it.
Can I share something?
Yes, of course.
Assalamu alaikum. So I was looking at the activity, and I think it's a wonderful, great activity. What I was looking at it was from a divisional level. Like, for instance, if I am dealing with high school students, I would probably change the way they would present it, because kids have more appreciation and more knowledge of all the mediums that they can use. However, if I'm dealing with elementary kids, I would probably change the process. I would differentiate where the process is, and based on their level of, and I'm looking at it just as the whole lesson. Standard would be the same for all the students, because I still want them to achieve the learning goal. But the way I approach it, I would probably look at it from the age level of the students, and that's how I would initially differentiate. And then going from there, I mean, if it's the presentation and I'm dealing with the high school students, I would see a lot of a variety of and a variety of presentation modes, and a lot of creativity comes out there. Elementary students, since they require more of guidance through the process, I would probably make the process much more guided for students, those who are at a beginning level, and again, this is irrespective of how much do they know about that topic. It just gives them some leeway of what they want to approach. I think it's a wonderful activity.
Great. Okay, great. No, I think I see there seems to be some just the sentiment that maybe we should wait a little bit longer towards the end, maybe, if we have time. So we can move forward for sure.
Or Brother Ibrahim, if you'd like to, maybe if others would like to share at this point, and maybe kind of do it instead of in separate breakout rooms, but in the main session,
yeah,
what they might do, give them a chance to talk.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you put the slide back up that has the different groups, like A, B, and C, that maybe we can reference?
Right, sorry, I know we didn't probably, you came this morning not wanting to do any work, maybe.
So I want to put an input here. This is Shaheen. So the purpose of designing a lesson plan is student engagement. So one of my focus will be how I can have the student engaged, and end result, the product. That will really tell me what each and individual students know about it. So my tweak will be on the design, like giving them multiple ways of representation of their learning.
Okay, okay. Anybody else would like to share?
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you so much for the presentation. It's really interesting, and I'm a big fan of small group differentiated instruction. The problem is always assessment, because you differentiate instruction, but then when you come to assessment, you end up giving the same assessment, because that's how it is in the system. If you go take a PSAT, SAT, or ACT, you're going to take the same assessment, whether you are a below level student, on level student, or above level student. So in a regular school setting, let's say, how do you go about that? Where you still align your assessment with your instruction without getting into that trap that you are preparing students for the same standards.
Sure. Well, I mean, the pre-assessments that you're doing, or this formative assessment that you're doing, it doesn't have to be a full-blown, test or quiz, or it's something that's happening continuously. Like we talked at the beginning, it's quick entry tickets or exit tickets or quick scans before the lesson that you have to spend time on to sort of unpack what the students know, right? Understand more about the students. So it could be a quick write, for example, about the topic. But from that quick write, from that information that you get from students, you can quickly understand where they are, where they stand in terms of readiness. For example, are they ready to learn on the level, on grade level? Maybe, we might feel that in elementary, as long as I present the information in the textbook, in the chapter, all the students need to learn about that, and that's it. But some of your students have been exposed; they bring knowledge about that topic already, so they would need to learn on a different level than the whole group. You can assess that from a quick assessment. It doesn't have to be a full-blown assessment that meets or that hits on all the standards or all the learning targets. So quick assessments, very small, short, quick assessments, allows you to gather more information about your students, and it doesn't have to be a full-blown assessment.
Thank you so much. I agree with you. I'm a big fan of formative assessments too. I mean, those understanding, checking for understanding on the go, right? Throughout the process are definitely the best way to check for students' mastery and understanding of them.
Definitely, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. Yes, we have Miss Sister Mary.
Oh, Assalamu alaikum. My name is Sister Miriam. I was thinking an activity would be a think, pair, share. I would group up some A's and B's together. And since they like names and events, we could do like Julius Caesar, Augustus Caesar, and the B's would essentially help teach a little bit to the A's since they know very little. And then I would also group up C and A, and architecture could just be Rome, like the Colosseum, and the fights that they used to have there with the gladiators, and C would also teach A. So this would be a think, pair, share, and then they share to the entire class, and then everybody learns in the end. Inshallah.
That's wonderful. That's beautiful. That sounds great. That's a great idea to differentiate process. So that's a process, right? You're allowing students to process the information in a certain way. And for many of them, they probably like to talk about what they know, share what they know. Others like to listen, and because it's happening on that front, social front, learning can, happen for everyone. So I like that. I like that idea of differentiating process.
Thank you, Jazakallah.
Ajmain, thank you. Would anyone else like to share?
Yes, Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
I think towards the end, I could see that all three groups coming together and work on a model for the architecture part.
Definitely, that could be a great product as part of a larger. So that's differentiating product, right? You've decided that that's what you want to fine tune as a teacher. You want to assign a product for students based on their maybe interest, and we'll look at these things as we progress in the presentation, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
May I share my ideas?
Yes, of course.
Thank you. For group A, I would have a presentation in case we have some visual learners and maybe their reading level may not be on level. So I would have a presentation with visuals, both some literature, but a lot of visuals about architecture, just to get some, to gather some information. And then for group B, it's going to be reading material about the government. And for group C, they are going to do a research on their own about these two, depending on their interest. And then for group A, they would share their findings. They may create a model based on what they learned. For group B, it's going to be a news report about government in ancient Rome. And for group C, if you were a leader in ancient Rome, how would the government look like? What is going to be different from what was in reality, basically? Or if you were an architect back in ancient Rome, what differences would you bring or add to what we know about architecture in ancient Rome? So they get to that level of creativity.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you very much for sharing. Yeah. So, and I've heard a lot of different ways to differentiate content. You talked about having pictures ready for students and process and product. So those are all great examples of basically fine tuning these different curricular elements to respond to students.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, let's go ahead and move forward. Bismillah. Okay, so we talked, I'm going to delve a little bit more into interest and learning profile. Interest, like I said, refers to a person's affinity or curiosity or passion for a topic. And I'm going to talk about a few strategies here. Okay. The first one, are you guys able to see my screen? Only the slide, is it? Okay. All right, so curriculum concepts, what does that mean? Okay, first, we have to ask ourselves, the content that we teach our students is there to equip them with what exactly? Right? Why are we teaching them these topics and these lessons, right? I want you to imagine that your class is the only class, the only Islamic studies class or the only reading class that your student will ever take, right? Imagine that your class is the only class that your students will ever take. Forget about all the workbooks and chapters in the textbook. What would you want your students to learn? What would you want your students to learn if you know that this is the only class, reading or Islamic studies, that they will ever take, okay? Concept is a way. Well, let me come back to this. Basically, a concept is a way to articulate the worth of a unit, and that students are drawn to it. But let me come back to this real quick. Let's say I'm teaching an ELA class, right? Do I want them to learn these things? And this is the only reading class, this is the only ELA class that they will ever take. Do I want them to learn about Shakespeare and Walt Whitman and symbolism and the perfect paragraph and syntax? Maybe, yes, right? I want to teach them all of these things, but I also want them to be in service of larger ideas, right? I want them to learn how to appreciate language. I want them to know what is hope, what is justice. I want them to explore, noble ideas. And understand issues that matter to Muslims, understand the interconnectivity of things, okay? So anytime we if we want to appeal to an interest, the interest of students, right? I want them to be able to answer life's toughest questions, right? I will arrange my content into important themes and concepts so that students are always interested. So here's a list of concepts right? Harmony and balance, for example, in math, right? Community and teamwork, power and responsibility, humanity and progress, friendship and identity, environment and conservation, sustainability, equality and freedom, right? If this is the only class that they will ever take with me, yes, I want them to read Walt Whitman and understand symbolism, but I also want them to be able to answer more important questions. Right, let's mute.
Ooh, love it.
Can everyone mute themselves if they're
Yeah.
Yes.
Why didn't you share الحلقة هذيك الفيديو اللي شفته؟
Could
Who is
you
it?
do it from your
هذا اللي
side?
قلت أنا شفته في
Sister Aisha, Assalamu alaikum. Is it Sister Aisha or no? No. Okay, here we go. All right. Moving on. So, how do you differentiate your curricular elements in response to student interest? Okay, here's one way. So, for content, you can have interest-based reading. So, the skills, reading skills can be learned whether students are reading about sports or whether they're reading about gaming. You can still teach them the reading skills. You can have material and articles on various topics. If you've done, your assessments and you've understood your students and you know what kind of interests they have, what are they curious about, what do they like doing outside of school, what are their hobbies, then you would have a range of material and articles that match their interest. Video recording, centers, and studying concept, like we talk about. Arrange your lessons and your units in concepts, because students are drawn to important ideas. Students are interested in learning about important ideas, like community, like friendship, like equality. So once you've arranged them in concepts, it's likely to meet a wide range of student interests. Process. We'll talk about student choice and choice menus. And then there's a wealth of information out there about the different, strategies that you can use. There's group investigations, literature circles. I'm sure you guys have used literature circles. Product. You can have real life products because, it has to match student interest and what students like and what students are curious about. You can also have choice menus that support student varied choice of expression. If students are interested, for example, in crafts, you can assign a product that matches their interest. If they are interested in writing, you can have them write about a topic of interest and review their writing skills. If they like to talk and they like to, interact with others, you can have them teach a lesson on a topic, and that could be their product as well. So if you have to understand what students are interested in, and each student, remember that graphic, each student comes with a different, interest level on this spectrum that spans humanity itself, right? And you got to determine what their interests are. So, and that's one of the reasons you're constantly doing assessments and you're constantly meeting with your students to learn more about them so that you can respond to their needs. Let's move forward here. This is a choice menu that you can use. For example, I'm just using examples here. This is about To Kill a Mockingbird. Students have to accumulate 400 points, so they get to choose what to do to get to these points. And you have a list of a menu of things, of tasks. Some of them are processes, right? Activities that they have to create, they have to write. Some of them are content, right? You're differentiating content. They have to view the movie, for example. They have to watch the movie. And that's the difference, right? A lot of it is process, though. A lot of this is process activities. Okay, moving forward, learning profile. So we talked about readiness, we talked about interest. Let's talk about learner profile. Learning profile has to do with the way in which students learn. It may be shaped by intelligence, gender, or just, their learning style. Some students need to discuss these ideas with their friends. They need to talk about it with others, right? A lot of students, they just prefer to do independent work and work alone, and that's how they learn. Some students prefer analytical tasks. They like to analyze things. They like to compare and contrast. And others prefer just to see the big picture and understand the value of this knowledge and why it's relevant to their lives. So learner profile, and the idea is not to pigeonhole any one student in a specific place, right? Like we said, intelligence is very fluid. I can learn in so many different ways. But the moment you talk about learner profile, you're talking about multiple intelligences, right? So, and again, there's an abundance of resources about how to differentiate in response to multiple intelligences. Think of Howard Gardner's visual learners and kinesthetic learners and interpersonal and intrapersonal. All these different intelligences tell you about your students and help you design and plan lessons and experiences that meet their needs. Remember, it's all about meeting individual student needs and not teaching to the whole class, the whole group. Let's see. The goal is not to label or pigeonhole students as particular kinds of learners, but rather to offer varied ways of approaching learning and then helping students determine which of those seem more effective in supporting their learning. This is I wanted to share this. I scanned it from one of the books I have here. And it's basically almost like a questionnaire that you can have students fill out at the beginning of the year. You can create, if you're online, you can create a Google form and assign it to each student to sort of understand more about them and to learn more about their learning profile. This would definitely help them. All right. This would help you understand more about the student. All right. And then finally, how do you differentiate in response to learner profile? For auditory learners, you can assign certain podcasts that they can listen to. Visual learners, videos. For those who like to interact, you can do like a role play, for them to act out ideas. Graphic organizers as well. Those who are visual learners, maybe they need to see a graphic organizer to receive the information. Process, multiple versions of a math problem, for instance. Manipulatives, people like to work alone, work with a partner, and then try-mind activities, which I will go over shortly. Products, again, to meet the different learning styles that you have in the classroom. It can be an end-of-unit assessment, like a test, for those who like to work alone. It could be a portfolio for those who like to show their work and compile evidence of what they've done and what they've understood. Remember that products have to demonstrate that students have learned something. Essays, if they like to write about it. You can integrate technologies. For digital learners. Okay, so try-mind activities. This is another strategy here that you can use to respond to learner profile. So Robert Sternberg, he talked about the idea that human beings have three different types of intelligences: analytical intelligence, practical intelligence, and creative intelligence. Each one of us, we bring with us, your students, they carry with them this learning profile, or this variety, this range of intelligences, okay? Each student. Some of them are better in analytical tasks, but they still, you know, some of them are not so great in analytical tasks, but it doesn't mean that they're not able to do so. The TryMind activity basically is a way to give students the opportunity to apply all of these intelligences. And this is how it's done. Right? You always begin with the learning goals, right? You know what you want your students to know. You know what you want them to learn, right? In response to this goal, you develop an analytical task, a practical task, and a creative tasks, right? And you know, students understand what must be done in each task, and they complete it. You can organize these tasks either on different stations in the room, or if you're online, you can do assignments on Google Classroom. You can assign different assignments, and all the students understand that they have to go through these 3 tasks. And just to explain a little bit more, so the analytical tasks usually involves steps, right? It's very mathematical, more like the scientific process, for instance. There are steps that they have to follow. Practical tasks are always relevant to students' lives. You have to structure the process or the tasks around something that the students can relate to, around something that the students are interested in. And then finally, creative intelligence is a task that requires problem solving and imagination. And if you sort of create and give students the opportunity to you know, engage in all these different tasks, you would have differentiated according to learner profile. Okay, so we talked about readiness, interest, and learner profile. I shared some activities with you. Now I wanted to quickly, we have about 30 minutes, talk about content, a little bit more about content, process, and product, okay? So content is, and then inshallah we'll have some time for questions. Content is basically the teacher's input, right? It's what we teach and what we want students to learn. That's your content. Okay, there's 2 ways. You can either adapt or change what you're teaching, what you're delivering, right? Mini lessons, whole group, small group, right? How do we teach, what we teach? Or you can adapt and modify how you give students access to what you want them to learn. Maybe there's an article somewhere in the classroom that you've highlighted that you want students to read. Maybe there's a video online that you want them to watch. Maybe there's a podcast, right? That's how you modify content. How do you give students access? Just change the way you give them access. For example, let's say that you know, you have a math lesson on fractions. You understand that one of your groups needs more practice with division, so you might have to give them access to a lesson on division first, right? And you allow others to work independently on an open-ended task, but in terms of content and teacher input, you need to work with some of your groups. Let's say there's reading for more ideas, for main ideas. A group, they need more simple, slower instructions about main ideas. They don't understand it. They don't get it. You've done a pre-assessment and you understand that some of your students don't understand it. Some other students are ready to go and read grade level books and explain main ideas. Other students are able to read books above grade level and explain main ideas. But your content, what you teach, your input is still needed for some of your students. Learning about vertebrae. Again, some may need a mini lesson, but some are able to investigate deeper and more complex ideas. So you have to think about teacher input and, you know, how do you modify it to meet individual student needs. Okay, so that's content, right? Let's quickly talk about process. So here's what you need to know about process. Whenever students encounter a new idea, new information, a new lesson, they run it through their own filters, right? And once they've run it through their own filters, they've processed it in their own way, then it becomes theirs. Then they've owned it. And our task as teachers is to provide multiple opportunities for processing so that students with so many different filters, right, can access the information and make sense of the information. Process usually involves an activity. It's active learning. Students are doing something with the information or the skills they've learned, okay? Just a little bit more on process activities designed for students to make sense of their learning, make sense of content and the knowledge and ideas and the readings. If you taught students about, for example, Surah Al-Duha, if you're a Quran teacher, what kind of activities would you provide students to process and retain all the information? That's what process is. Okay, so let's talk about stations. This is another strategy, and you differentiate for process, okay? Stations can be used for in-person teaching, and it's basically different spots in the class where students work on different tasks simultaneously. There's a difference between stations and centers. Stations, they're completely pre-planned. You have to create these stations physically beforehand, right? And this can be something that you do frequently throughout the week, right? And basically, and then you have signs or symbols. Each station is labeled with a sign or a symbol or a color. But the most important thing that you have to know about stations is that every station includes a teacher-generated task that attends to the student's readiness, interest, and learning profile. And stations, all the students have to go to all the stations, right? So it's not that a particular group goes to this station and a particular group goes to that station. No, all the students must visit all the stations, right? And that's the difference between stations and centers. We'll talk a little bit about centers as well. So for example, you can have a writing station, right? Writing stations. So for the day, you have a lesson about writing, and you've had 4 stations. You've created 4 stations in the room for students to visit. All the students must visit these stations. Station 1, collection of stories with punctuation, grammar, spelling, and syntax errors. There's a variety of reading material to appeal to student interest and levels. So you've created a station where students go to and they pick up stories with some errors, right? And there's different levels of reading, and you might also put in different topics: dinosaurs, sports, cars, right? And again, it goes back to resources. Station 2, teacher works with students on writing mechanics. All the students have to come to that station for the teacher to work with them and review writing mechanics. Station 3, create a presentation about simple, complex, and compound sentences. This is a task that students have to complete. And then Station 4, compare the patterns of writing in 2 articles and discuss in pairs. So students are rotating and visiting each station and completing these assignments and these things that the teacher has pre-planned and placed for them. One thing about stations is that they're all connected, right? They're all connected to writing. They're all sort of developing the same, they're focused on the same topic, they're focused on the same skill. And that's the good thing about stations, is that, you can take a lesson, you can take a learning target or a topic and create multiple opportunities for students to engage in this topic through walking around, visiting the stations, talking to their peers, and you would have automatically fulfilled so many learning styles and so many readiness levels and so many interests automatically, right? It's sort of a way to differentiate for the spectrum of students in a very efficient way, right? Those are writing stations. Similarly, I have an example here for a math station. And this is all about computation. Station 1 is a teacher station. Students are learning computation directly from the teacher. Station 2, there's independent work. Station 3, there's teacher-generated real-life scenarios, for example, like making purchases at a grocery store, right? Students work in pairs, and they've completed that real-life scenario at a grocery store, and they finish their work and they put it in a folder, for instance. Station 4, students work on math apps that offer game-based practice on a range of computation skills. You have in one station basically iPads, maybe, and students have to spend 10, 15 minutes completing their work on the iPad, on one of the apps or one of your digital curriculum platforms. Station 5, maybe there's, if you have students working on this every day and they're coming on these different stations, there can be something long-term where students are working on a project and they're rotating every day they're in class, they're going to that station and they're completing work on that project. Again, it's an efficient way to meet different learner needs, readiness, and interest. We have vocab stations. I'm going to move quickly. We get the gist of it. If you're online and you're doing a lot of Zoom sessions with your kids, with students, this is something that one of our teachers is actually using, and I borrowed it from her. It's kind of like stations, but it's breakout rooms, right? So the first thing the teacher says is to rename yourself with the number of today's preferred working style. And she explains to them what the working styles are, right? So working style number 1 is, I want to be in an open workroom, right? I want to talk to others about today's work and use the mic to collaborate and discuss and ask questions, right? I want to work in that kind of room. Another work style number 2 is a quiet workroom, right? I want to work quietly on today's work and use the chat box to talk to others. So I don't want to talk and be unmuted. No, I just want to use the chat box. That's work style number 2. Work style number 3 is the teacher support room. I'm feeling a bit confused or lost right now, and I would like to be in a room with the teacher to get more support. And then finally, work style number 4 is independent workroom. I want to work quietly and independently on today's work by myself. Students rename themselves with today's preferred working style, and the teacher basically puts them in breakout rooms, and that's how they work. And the teacher visits and checks on them in the breakout rooms to see if they're doing their work. And once if you communicate your expectations clearly as a teacher that this is what you have to be doing, and you go in and you find students not doing what they promise they'll do, you simply remind them that, hey, we talked about this work style is to work quietly and to use the chat box. Please remember to use the chat box and work quietly. So I liked this idea if you're online. Centers differ from stations in that they are distinct. So stations, like I said, they focus on the same topic, the same skill, and they work in concert. Centers do not. Teachers can create a science center, a writing center, and an arts center. Students don't need to move to all centers to achieve proficiency with a topic or set of skills. And of course, you're still constructing all of the material and the tasks at each center. Centers are really used for small group instruction. So there's always students who are working with the teacher on a particular set of skills, reading, math, and then you have students who have chosen to work on different areas and different subjects for the day or for that time block, and they've chosen to work on that, and that's completely fine. All right, let's move forward. I need to allow some time for questions and answers. Okay, like I said, so a learning center is an area designed to teach, provide practice on, or extend and improve a student's knowledge, skill, or understanding. Learning center is typically the teacher center, where the teacher is working on these things. but it can also be a place where students go to practice something, when they're ready to practice more, they need more drill on, they need to read up more about it. An interest center is designed to motivate students' exploration of a topic in which they have interest. Interest centers always change, and the teacher is always basically changing the material and the activities every week to respond to the different interests in the classroom. And you would have discovered your interest if you're constantly assessing students. Centers include activities that vary from simple to complex, structured to open-ended. Centers focus on clearly defined goals and provide clear instructions for each activity. And of course, they use material activities that address the wide range of reading levels, reading profile, and student interest. All right. So we talked about process, content, and now finally, I believe it's product. Okay. Real quick, product is very self-explanatory. It's a vehicle through which students exhibit what they have come to understand and can do as a result of learning. It has to reflect student understanding, right? So when they submit the product to you, they would have spent a significant amount of time working on this product, and it's not a way for them to process. It's a way for them to show that they understand, and it's usually tangible. Like I said earlier, unlike the sense-making activity, which is usually short and focuses on a few skills or key understanding, a product is a long-term endeavor. It's high quality in the sense that it forces students to think, apply, and even expand all their understandings of the topic or unit. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to skip this. We have about 15 to 20 minutes. There's something called the differentiator. I don't know if you guys have ever seen this, but let me click on it to show you. And you share. Okay, so this differentiator, are you guys able to see the differentiator?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. You're basically completing a sentence stem here as a teacher. Students will, you can change the thinking skill, the content, some of the resources, and your products and your groups within this sentence stem. So for example, your thinking skill, what is thinking skill? It's the process, right? How students process information and what you want them to do with the information. So students will, for example, remember or define, and it automatically changes here. No, you want students, you have some students who are, on a different learning level, and they're ready to compare and contrast, right? They're ready to examine, or maybe they're ready to design, right? So this is the higher level. And then for content, so what is it that they're doing? What's the content? What's the material that they're learning about? They will, design the rules, for example. And then here, of course, you edit your topic or your lesson, the rules of the, because we've been using the Muhajirin, of the Ansar when they received al-Muhajirin, using your resources. What are they using? Is it just a textbook? Is there a library book? Is there, did you let them interview an imam? And then, and create. What is it that you want them to create? What are they ready to create? What's the product? Well, it's rules, so maybe they can create something visual, or maybe multimedia. Maybe it's, an illustrated book in groups, and then of course in groups of 2 or 3 or 4. and that's the differentiator. Let me go back to this presentation here. All right, final considerations. Okay, so, again, you can start small. You don't have to immediately go into stations and centers and, sort of try to get a bunch of resources that appeal to a lot of different interests and different reading levels. It's okay. If you don't have that kind of resources at your school, you can start small, start with one lesson, do a pre-assessment, and try to modify something for the students, right? Grow slowly, but definitely grow. Always give clear and thoughtful directions. Whatever activity you're doing, if you're afraid that you might lose control of the classroom because it's requiring movement, you got to give clear directions about what you expect from them, and constantly use reinforcing language. Whatever you see that you like, say, hey, I like that, such and such did this. I like to see more of that. I noticed that group A was working quietly and respectfully. Thank you very much. Just use reinforcing language. If you have routines, you need, any differentiated classroom usually has differentiation routines. You walk into the classroom and students are rotating, they're in groups, teachers working with some, others are working independently. There has to be routines going on in the classroom. And of course, stay organized, folders, colors, strategic anchor charts. A differentiated classroom usually has, different things going on in the classroom, different areas, color-coded things, just your furniture is even, arranged a certain way. Keep that in organized, and save your work and stuff that you generate for future use. All right, a few more nuggets of wisdom. We have to let go of the idea that student differences are problematic. Student differences are inevitable, and students bring these different, just content and different knowledge and different skills, different dispositions to the classroom, and we have to just learn how to meet their needs and differentiate to meet their needs. Remember that your awareness of their readiness, their interest, and their learning profile is developing continuously. There's no single right way to create differentiated classrooms. If you want to just change up the activity that students complete for the day, but the content is the same, that's fine. The idea is to just start somewhere and slowly grow. And of course, any education, specifically a whole child education, must attend to the individual needs, preferences, and profiles. And keep this in mind. Sometimes when there's a new idea, all students could work on it, of course, but to deepen understanding in a single unit, you will likely need to differentiate. The benefits of differentiated instructions. Remember, students learn the same material as their peers at a level of challenge appropriate to them, like we said. It incorporates the learning styles that help them to learn most effectively. It increases student engagement, right? Something is more appealing to them, something matches their profile, matches their readiness, will guarantee engagement. It enhances motivation to learn. In this environment, especially with online learning, there's a lack of motivation. So I think if we differentiate more for students at home, and we create more opportunities that match their needs at home, we can probably get more motivation out of them. They're likely to take responsibility, for their learning. Always, if you're differentiating the different processing and appealing to the different learning profiles, you're likely to improve additional skills like collaboration and cooperation and critical thinking. And finally, you're giving students options for how to express their learning in terms of products. And then we have about 10 minutes. I think you guys get the philosophy and the whole point of differentiation. But just to wrap up, I think, we live our lives as work, as a work in progress. right? From early on, we develop solid beliefs about many things as human beings. We develop beliefs about, for example, what it takes to make a perfect French toast, right? We develop beliefs about what it means to be a good husband or a good wife or a good mother. And we develop beliefs about the best career options, right? And as we live our lives, through our experiences, both large and small, we test and refine those beliefs. For example, very young adults, for example, enter into parenthood with a robust philosophy about what it means to be a good parent, right? Rather, we slowly become more reliable and more principled. So teachers also enter their initial teaching experience. Not too many teachers enter it with an informed and tested philosophy, right? But the best teachers evolve over time, right? As a result of examination and reflection about the nature of their work. And increasingly, I think the best teachers, as they grow and evolve, they're no longer grounded in convenience or in habit or compliance, but there's a more solid philosophy, right? A compass that's pointing them in the right direction. And I think with any teacher must begin to realize that differentiated instructions is in sync with a certain fundamental belief, right? And I will conclude with this, inshallah. Differentiated instructions is in sync with a certain fundamental belief, the belief about the worth of every individual, and that education can dignify every student. So as you begin to grow as a teacher, that belief that every student is worthy of learning becomes part of your philosophy, and it's part of your, it begins to manifest itself in your classroom, and that's part of differentiation. It's rooted in that fundamental belief that every student has the right to learn in the way that suits them. That's, I think, all right. This is a different graphic. Just skip this. That's it. I think that's it for now. We have about a few more minutes. We'll stop for questions and answers. There's more material than I thought.
Yeah, I just want to give a quick comment. First of all, Brother Ibrahim, it was an amazing presentation. I think the teachers really learned the dynamic of differentiating in the classroom. When just as from a parent's point of view, when the parents send their children to the school, they basically want to make sure that their children are met where they are, not where the classes or not where the curriculum is. They want to make sure this child is met where they are and they're taken from there and uplifted from where they are. So differentiated instruction is the key to making sure that we are meeting children at their level, right? And everybody is in a different levels for teacher to really understand, engage, and be able to have those groups are probably very strategically very important and very comes with experience as well, but also a great understanding of where they are. So really getting to know the teacher to the student is also a biggest key that has to come together to finally pull those kids up to where they should be. So mashallah, a very wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Alhamdulillah, Jazakallah khair. I know there's a lot of information and it's hard to separate when you're talking about differentiation, it's hard to separate all these elements, right? Because they're very intertwined, they're very related. So inshallah, I hope this helped. Inshallah, I hope this would encourage teachers to go back and fine tune, their content and process to meet student individual needs, inshallah. If you guys have any questions, any clarifications, I'd be more than happy to respond to them, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much, Brother Ibrahim.
Alaikum salam.
For this wonderful session. Thank you.
Of course. Alhamdulillah, my pleasure.
Are there any questions?
Right.
Let's see.
So we will post the recording on the CISNA YouTube channel. I put the link in the chat box. And if you would like to access the slides from Brother Ibrahim, if you will send them to me, I'll send them to everyone who registered so that you'll have those too, inshallah.
Yeah, inshallah. I think one final consideration that I would like to say, I think as Muslim educators, I think every concept or principle that you're trying to teach your students, and in Quran, you're trying to teach them so much. In Islamic studies, you're trying to teach them so much, right? But everything that you want to teach them contains within it more than one level of learning. This is the one nugget of wisdom I want you guys to take with you. It contains within it more than one level of learning. Like I talked about human cells, for instance, right? And even the story of the Ansar and Muhajirin. You can study the facts and the names and the events, but you can also study it on a different level, right? I think it's valuable practice for teachers to sort of unpack the standards, to unpack those lessons for multiple levels of learning. That's a valuable practice. Once you've learned and you start by just studying the topic, studying the lessons, studying the goals, studying the standards. Once you begin to unpack them, then you can begin to assess your students as to what you want them to know. Do you want them to know just a foundational level, or do you want them to really walk out of your classroom with a complex and deep appreciation for your topics and your lessons and your content? And with that, inshallah, I hope أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم. Inshallah, this is beneficial for you, and thank you all very much. I appreciate the time.
Jazakallah khairan. It was very beneficial, brother. Jazakallah khairan.
Thank you everyone for staying on. We appreciate everyone joining, and it's so nice to see when I get to gallery view, see all these familiar faces. I've missed seeing you all. Miss Ali, I see you there. Linda, Soraya, so nice to see everyone. And I wanted to also point out Genesee Academy is another school where we had, I think, multiple numbers of teachers, I think maybe over a dozen who registered to attend. Please do give us feedback. You have the cisnaoffice@gmail.com address that you can write to. Let us know what you'd like to hear more about, and we will try and bring you whatever we can to support you in the work that you do, which, we just don't say thank you enough. Thank you all for everything that you're doing for our students.
Assalamu alaikum.
All right, assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you.
Will there be a certificate of attendance or participation given?
If you send me an email, I can send you a certificate of attendance, inshallah.
Okay.
And like Sufia said, if you'd like to email her about topics you'd like to see in future webinars, we'd appreciate that. Let us know what you'd like to see next. And a shout out to Noor al-Iman. Assalamu alaikum. Sufia's former colleagues, you don't know. All right, and my current ones, sorry. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us. We'll ask Brother Ibrahim to close us out with a dua, please.
Of course. All right. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. جزاكم الله خير.
Thank you.
Can you give them the email address, please?